Good afternoon and welcome along to Training Tuesday. My name's James and coming to you live here from our ChamSys office here in Southampton. Today we're going to be talking about 10Scene and what this means, what you can do with 10Scene, specifically really looking at that with a MagicQ system. You can of course connect 10Scene products to QuickQ and also to our genetics nodes. We will be doing a bit of a deep dive and some QuickQ features next month in September, so watch this space for that there. As I said, today we're only going to be looking at 10Scene, focusing on connecting to a MagicQ ecosystem. Before we get going, hello to the usual faces out there. Hello to those on both YouTube and Facebook. Who have we got on Facebook today? Hello Mehmet, hello Mario, and YouTube we're a little late with starting the stream off, but we are there, we are live, and hopefully there's a few, I can see there's people watching, you've just been quiet in the comments. Anyway, so if you've not come across 10Scene, TouchScene before, well, let me talk about what I've got on the table here, then I'll talk about what you can do with it, and we'll go from there. So on the table here, I've got myself here, let's talk at the end of the chain, I've got myself a genetics 10Scene wall plate here. Now the wall stations here, this is actually the previous version. The latest 10Scene wall plates have a metal plate. This is the version, previous version, which has the plastic plate. So the latest ones are a metal plate on them. I don't know why I haven't got one in the room here, but anyway. So they're a metal plate now, and on the back they have RJ45 connectors on the back, RJ45 sockets, so they're dead easy for wiring. In fact, you don't need to do any wiring on them. You can just run a regular straight Cat5 cable, doesn't matter if you wire A or B, as long as it's straight, as long as it's the same wiring at both ends. You can run that between your wall plate, and then you run it to a 10Scene port. In the box with the latest wall plates, you get one of our 10Scene to RJ45 socket adapters, so it is really simple. There's no manual wiring like you had to do on these version plates here. What can you connect a 10Scene wall plate to, I hear you ask? Well, you can connect a 10Scene wall plate to anything that has a 10Scene port on it. So in my case here, I've got it connected up to our 10Scene gateway, our genetics 10Scene gateway. Now a number of our MagicQ products and also some QuickQ products and also genetics nodes have 10Scene ports on them. So for example, our genetics GN5 node and our genetics GN10 node have 10Scene ports on them. Also, we have a gateway in the genetics family. On the MagicQ end, our MQ250M, our MagicQ Rack, our MagicQ DIN, our Compact Connect, they will have a 10Scene port on them. Wherever you have a 10Scene port, you can connect a genetics node to it as well. So in the case here, yes, I can connect a 10Scene wall plate to a gateway, a GN5 or GN10, but of course what that's doing is it's then allowing me to use the node as basically a protocol converter. So I've got my gateway doing that here, 10Scene in, network protocol output converts to a network protocol, which can then be read by a MagicQ system or MagicQ console. Of course, if I connect the wall plate directly to the console, like a 250 for example, it just works native. I don't need to do any protocol conversion. If I connect a 10Scene wall plate to say a gateway, a GN5 or GN10, I can then have that hooked up and talking to the console or PC system via network on the other side. So the setup I've got here, I'm going wall plate. I'm going to a 10Scene gateway, which is my protocol converter. Then I'm going out of that via network into our GS8, our network switch. Then I'm simply coming out of the GS8 and going to my laptop here, which is running MagicQ. Now that could of course be a MagicQ console. On the counter, I've got a couple of wall plates. So the 10Scene gateway actually has, if you look on this side, has two 10Scene ports. Wherever you see a 10Scene port, you can connect up to 10 10Scene devices per port, and you daisy chain it a little bit like DMX. So on one port I've just got one wall plate here. On my second port I'm actually daisy chaining. I'm going out of that port into a 10Scene contact, which is another 10Scene device, I'll come to that in a moment, out of that and into a wall plate, and I could keep going on. You can have 10 10Scene devices per port. So gateway has two 10Scene ports, I could have 20 wall plates connected. Now each device can have a separate ID, so it can be triggering different things, and that's what we're going to look at in MagicQ. Also on the counter here, I have one of our genetics TouchScenes, which this is a network device, whereas the wall plate and gateway, so wall plate and contact, they talk our 10Scene protocol. Our genetics TouchScenes are a simple network device. So yes, they have an RJ45 socket on the back. They don't need to connect to a gateway. They're PoE powered, so I'm connecting it to a PoE switch here, and then out of that into my console. So that's what I've got on the counter here. Let's start with getting the wall plate working. So we've plugged the things up already. I've plugged in my 10Scene wall plate. I'm daisy chaining to a 10Scene contact. I'll come to the functionality of a 10Scene contact later. And then I'm going to the gateway and it's plugged into my laptop. Great, so physically it's plugged together. Well, what are we doing to actually make it work? If we jump into MagicQ here, as you can see, I'm running our latest stable 1983 here. First off, I'm going to go to Setup. I'm going to Setup here. I'm going to go View Settings, and I'm going to go Network. And of course, you can see I'm set to a 10.IP 10.00.25. We've covered this many times in Training Tuesday. MagicQ's IP needs to be set to the same as a network adapter on your PC. So in Control Panel, I've already manually set this 10.IP address here. It has to be the same. So double click and select your IP address. If you don't see the IP that you want there, well, you need to manually set that on the network adapter on your PC. So I've done that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Net Manager at the top here. And I should be able to see here now both my gateway and my touch scene because they're network devices. I won't see the wall plates here because they run on the 10Scene protocol. They're not network devices. So I can see my gateway, I can see the touch scene. Now, importantly, any gateways on the network can have an ID. So you can see here, this is set to ID 10. Now, if I had a GN5 or GN10 connected up as well, they can have IDs as well. When you're running them as just standard nodes, as ArtNet to DMX nodes, often you don't care about the IDs, you leave them as default and away you go. If you're using 10Scene, so you're using the 10Scene port on the back of your GN5 or GN10, and you want to be able to get that data into MagicQ, you need to be caring about the ID of a device. So you can see at the moment this is set to ID 10. If I want to change that, I simply type in the boxes. So I'm going to set this to ID 15, press enter. It takes a couple of seconds. There you go. You can see the device. The ID of this device is now ID 15. Now this is particularly important when it comes to contact triggers in a moment. So now I've set that up. I can see the gateway. The devices are connected. I need to go back to Setup, View Settings, and I'm going to go to my Ports tab, and I have some 10Scene options here. 3 options for 10Scene here. Now, the first option, 10Scene and TouchScene, basically is allowing the protocol, the 10Scene protocol and the TouchScene protocol to communicate with MagicQ. So, unlike most other menus in MagicQ where they're yes, no, or pick one option, actually this menu here, you can pick multiples of all the options. So inbuilt, the inbuilt 10Scene port on the back of a console, for example, an MQ250, is it enabled? Genetics or gateway are network devices, so a gateway GN5 or GN10, is that enabled to get the data in? Remote, well, we have a remote app, a 10Scene remote app for Android, iOS, is that enabled? And of course then the final one, TouchScene, are the network TouchScene interfaces enabled? So I've gone ahead and I've just allowed all 4 devices here, but you might want to lock it down and say, actually, well, I'm just going to use a gateway or genetics device. Don't enable the port on the back of the console because I don't trust someone to plug in something and use that. Again, it's pretty niche because you need a 10Scene wall plate to do that, but again, you can lock the system down. Okay. Then you have your 10Scene action. What are your 10Scene devices going to trigger? So again, you've got a whole bunch of options here. We could do a whole Training Tuesday on these. Very quickly, you could have your 10Scene wall plates controlling just playback 1 to 10. So essentially all the wall plates would all control playback 1 to 10, your main 10 playbacks. Now I could have 20, 50 wall plates. They would all be controlling playback 1 to 10. So if I press button 1 on one wall station, come back to another one, press button 1 on that one, it would be triggering the same thing on all wall plates. The same if I pick the exec1 option here, would basically look at execute page 1 and it would trigger the first 10 items. Now I want to use multiple wall plates here, so I'm going to use the exec1 multi option. When set to exec1 multi, it's looking at execute grid 1. And if I go to my execute window and I build myself up a grid, so set grid size, the width is going to be 10 because I have 10 buttons on a wall station. I mean, I can make the height however I like. Now we support up to 50 zones in MagicQ, so I could make it 10 by 50 if I want. Just for Training Tuesday, for you to be able to see the screen, I'm going to make it 10 by 6. And you can see it's made me a 10 by 6 grid. Essentially then, each row within the execute window becomes a zone. So the first row and first 10 items are going to be zone 1. The second row zone 2, third row zone 3, fourth row zone 4, and so on there. How do I now tell my wall plate here, which is connected to the system, which row it's controlling? Well, that's done by IDing the wall plate. So I'm going to go into my macro window, and in my macro window I have a view zone window and a view 10Scene window where I can see connected wall plates and 10Scene contacts. Now bear in mind here, this is not the net manager window, because these are not a network device. These are talking over the 10Scene protocol. You will see connected wall plates and contact devices in this window here. So just to recap there, setup, net manager is where you'll see things like gateways and touch scenes. If I go macro and view 10Scene as well, see the connected wall plates to my gateway type device. Now of course I've got to do the config of that first for me to be able to see those, as you can see the order I've done things here. Now each of these wall plates contacts can have an ID. So again, you ID them with a number. How do we ID them, I hear you ask? Well, you press the prog 10Scene button here. I don't know if you'll be able to see on the stream camera here, but on my 10Scene wall plate, it will now flash blue, and then it will show me the ID. So this one's flashing all buttons blue, and then it flashes button 2 red to show me this one is ID 2. This one is flashing all buttons blue, and then the first button to show me this one is ID 1. And my contact device is flashing all buttons blue, so red, and then number 4 to show me it's ID 4. Now how do you ID it? Well, if I want to change the ID of a device, if it's already been programmed, you press buttons 2, 7, 4, 9, so the inside pair 4, you press those. Then to put it in program mode, you press 1, 6, 9, so 1, 6, 5, 10, the outer buttons. Press those quickly, and then you just type the number in. So I'd go that, and I press 5, for example, and it's programmed as ID number 5. So once you've been around and ID'd your wall plates, given them a number, in the software, if we come back to MagicQ here, you turn off programming mode. So I hit prog 10Scene off, and it's now stored the IDs within those devices. And you can see here I've stored those devices. So I've got a wall plate of ID 1, a wall plate of ID 2, and if I come back to my execute window now, and I pick up my wall plate here, and I press say button 2 on it, you can see, so button 1 on the wall plate, you can see it's triggered row 2, because this wall plate is ID 2, item 1, and so on there. If I press the buttons on this wall plate here, so I can trigger all 10 of those items like so. Now these will respect how you've set your execute items up. I've set here as just normal buttons. If I was to do something like select these items here and change the button to be a solo button, for example, and now I step through a button, you can see if I have my execute window up, as I solo, it will now respect the soloing that I've set, so I only have one item at a time active. Of course, if I jump back into my execute window here and I was to do things like set a region on these buttons and set a region on those buttons, I can have my buttons running independently. So I can have buttons 1 to 5, buttons 6 to 10 grouped independently, so I can have different items on at the same time on the wall plate. But again, I can toggle between items, so I can only have one button of buttons 1 to 5 or one button of buttons 6 to 10, but they'll run independently there. And of course the other wall plate is ID 1, so you can see here that's controlling my items here. Now the idea of our 10Scene is you can link zones together. So we have this idea, as you can see in my execute window here, of zones. Each row is a zone, and you can see it's running independently. Now if I was to be running, say, a larger space, and that space maybe normally operates as 2 independent rooms, but maybe it's got an air wall or something that runs through the space, I take the air wall out, I want it to operate as one big room, I want the wall plates to be linked. Yes, you can do that. You can join zones together. So how do we do that? Well, we go to our macro window, we go to view zone here, and you can see join zone here set to separated. If I set that to joined, I've now joined zone 1 and 2 together, and you can see as I press a button on my wall plate here, it will trigger the items in the corresponding zones together now. Of course, I've done some soloing, so I should toggle those off first before I do that. But once I've done that, you can see then it will now respect, there you go, my zoning there, like so, and it'll toggle the items off and on in that zone together. Of course, I'm now going to go back to the macro window and I'm going to separate, and they're going to run independently. Now, you can automate that. Absolutely, you can use automations to do that. How would you do that? Well, let's go to the automation window. So I'm going to go to my macro window. I'm going to go to view automation this time, and I'm going to have a remote trigger. A remote trigger. Well, on the 10Scene gateway, or any product you see a 10Scene port, so again a 250, a GN5 or GN10, anytime you see a 10Scene port, yes, you can wire up wall plates to it, 10 wall plates or contact trigger boxes per port, but there's also a spare pin which you short to the ground pin, and that becomes just a simple open-close contact trigger. So you don't have to have a wall plate. You can use a 10Scene port as just a simple contact trigger if you want. You can use it for both. In my case here, what I've done is I've taken a wall plate, and just for the ease of a demo, I've drilled a hole in the bottom of it, and I've just put an open-close switch on it, and I've wired it up to the trigger port here. So how do I make this work? Well, do you remember I talked about the ID, the CamNet ID of the unit? Remember, in Setup, Net Manager, I have my device here, and I've knocked the network cable out of my gateway. There we go. Plug it back in again would help. And I should be able to see the device. There we go. You can see I set it to ID 15. Remember that? I set it to ID 15. So I'm going to go macro here, and in automation P2, I'm going to set here. So actually what I did is I did an insert automation. I set the type to remote. I've set the trigger to when it's an on. I'm going to set the ID of my box here to 15, because that's what I'd set the gateway to. Input 1, remember it's got 2 inputs, so it could be input 1 or 2. And I'm going to set it to playback 3 toggle. So when I press the button, this is my open close contact. When I open and close the contact, you can see in MagicQ, when I press the button, it's turning playback 3, because that's what's set here. Function playback 3 is turning on and off. Now I could do something like, instead of a playback toggle, I could do it as a zone toggle. So I could do zone switch, and I could choose the zone, let's say zone 2 for example, and you can see it's separated at the moment. When I press the button, it can join the zone together. It can be an open close of the zones there, based on me doing that. It's probably most useful if I do an on and off on that, but I can have it then become a 10Scene zone switch. So when I press my contact trigger, it's doing that open. There you go, you can see when I press, it's joined. When I release, it's separated again. Press, it's joined. Release, it's separated. So again, that could be a micro switch that's now built into the air wall. So I don't even have to interact with the software. When the air wall comes in and out, it automatically opens and closes the zoning. So that's just a single trigger. Other box I've got on the counter here, I've got my Genetics 10Scene contact box. Well, there's a couple of ways you can use this box. You can think of this box as a 10Scene wall plate. It has the 10Scene buttons on it. You ID it in exactly the same way. The other thing it's got then is each of its 10 buttons has a simple just open close contact for each of the 10 buttons. So maybe 10 buttons is too much control. You want to just have a simple toggle light switch in each venue, and you're just going to wire it back to this, which sits in a control room, and it's just going to be a simple on-off state per each room. Absolutely, you can do that. Now, one thing just to say with the contact box, if I go to Setup, View Settings, Ports, there is an option for the 10Scene contact box to act as a 10Scene wall plate, which I've now set to yes. It will respect its ID. So remember here in View 10Scene, this one has got ID number 4. So ID 4, when I press buttons on here, is now triggering items on row number 4, because it's ID number 4. And you can see as I'm pressing that, they're lighting up in the execute window like so then. So this is just acting then as a 10Scene wall plate. The other function of this box though is to act as 10 contact triggers. A bit more interesting. If I want more contact triggers, so I want a pressure pad, a motion sensor or something, or just some switches in a wall or something to act as contact triggers rather than just toggling executes, I would set my setup option to no. Don't work like a wall plate. Any wall plates connected through it will still work like wall plates. I'm just saying this device don't work like a wall plate anymore. Now I could say in the macro window, in automation, I can have a remote. And remember, we set IDs. So remember in macro view 10Scene, you have an ID, that zone ID here. Again, using that set prog 10Scene here, I set that to number 4. Well, that computes again here in automations where I've set P2 here to device number 4. Can have up to 50 of these boxes, so you can have 50 times 10 triggers into the system if you'd like. And again, I'm going to set the input. Input is now going to be the switch number, so I've got 10 switches here, so I've set input 1, I've set it to playback toggle, playback 1, and you can see here in MagicQ when I press the button, it's turning on and off playback 1. I've actually got a little board here which I've made up, which is just shorting the trigger at the bottom, which is just simulating an open and close of a trigger, and you can see as I press that, the light comes on at the bottom here. It's also triggering in MagicQ playback 1 there, and you can see I'm triggering that with my contact input there. And of course, being an automation, you're not limited to just playback toggles. With the remote, it could be toggling anything you like. It could be running a macro, it could be pressing go, it could be turning an execute on, it could be running a variable or something. Basically, the world's your oyster. Use any automation you like with these contact triggers now. Finally, on the counter here, I have a touchscene wall plate. The touchscene wall plate, we're not going to go into huge detail on it in this session here. It runs our touchscene protocol, and we can set a zone in a similar way. So essentially, it can work like a fancy looking wall station with custom logos, custom backgrounds. We have covered touchscene in other Training Tuesdays, and there's a bunch of YouTube videos available for touchscene as well, so do check those out. You guys have been incredibly quiet on the chat today. I don't know what I've done to upset you all. Particularly on YouTube. It does look like we're streaming there, and we might have had some issues, I think, with the stream at the start there. But there you go. There's an overview of 10Scene. As always, it's a live session. There's no questions in the chat for me today. What have I done to upset you all? But if you are watching this later on, if you're watching this in the coming weeks, we do monitor the socials on Facebook and YouTube, so do chuck a comment in there. We will pick it up. We will answer it later on. If not, join us again for Training Tuesday again next week. As I mentioned, we've been covering a lot of MagicQ recently in Training Tuesday. September Training Tuesdays is all going to be about QuickQ. So watch this space if you're a QuickQ user. We will be looking at QuickQ. We may even have some news to talk to you about in September on QuickQ. So thanks for joining us on Training Tuesday. See you again for the next Training Tuesday.